Mr. President, I've heard a number of speeches from my colleagues on the floor here today, both while presiding and just in the last few minutes, that call on President Obama for presidential leadership to help us reopen the government, address our serious long-term fiscal issues, and move us forward. And I just want to note for the folks who might be watching that the president is at this very moment sitting with the leadership of the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives, and tomorrow morning, I believe, has invited the Republican members of this body down to the White House for conversation. I think that we agree. And one of the core challenges we face as this federal shutdown goes into its, I believe, 10th day, is discerning exactly why the federal government is still shut down. When initially taken over the cliff into shutdown, it was to prevent the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. At least that's what a number of senators said on this floor. That was their purpose. Now, many days and many unintended and unexpected harmful consequences later, we're told what this was really all about was to force the president to negotiate. Well, I serve on the Budget Committee, and we passed more than 200 days ago, more than 6 months ago, a budget on this floor, and have tried to go to conference on that budget now 21 times, yet each time blocked, objected to by a small number of senators of the other party. So frankly, my expectation, my hope, is that we will return to a rational, rules-following process here, reopen the government, not default on our national debt, and begin those serious negotiations, those Budget Committee negotiations, which are long overdue to deal with the very real challenges facing our country. Mr. President, I wanted to speak today about one of the consequences of shutting down our federal government. We see new ones every day, and we hear about them here on the Senate floor. As the days drag on, we learn more and more about the impacts of the shutdown, sometimes with surprise, sometimes regret, sometimes with outrage. There's a lot on the line, and we've heard a lot about what the shutdown means for various functions of the executive branch and of the legislative branch. I've heard colleagues come and speak about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, about the FDA, about its impact on higher education, its impact on families, its impact on small businesses. I've heard lots of folks come to this floor and comment on how the executive branch and its functions that affect communities and families all over this country are affected by the shutdown. And we've heard, Mr. President, from our constituents who are trying to reach senators and trying to seek our help with a variety of federal services that they're frustrated the legislative branch is largely shut down. But there's another branch to our three-branch coordinate government. Absent from this debate and discussion is how the shutdown is affecting the judicial branch of our government. When the federal government shut down 10 years ago, the federal court system was initially seemingly largely unaffected. It's because they had enough funds in reserve to remain open for 10 business days, a period that will come to an end early next week. On Tuesday, the federal judiciary of the United States will run out of the reserve funds it's been using to stay open. The big question is what happens then. The chief judge of the bankruptcy court for the District of Delaware, my home state, told me, quote, "We are really in an uncertain situation, particularly when it comes to employees. I'm fearful for them and how they're going to be able to pay for rent and mortgages, provide food and daycare for their families." This is uncharted territory for our federal judiciary. When the money runs out, federal circuit and district courts will each be on their own, much like each senator who has to choose which of his employees or her employees are essential and deemed vital and need to stay, and which should be furloughed and stay home, uncertain whether they will be paid. Each district court and each circuit court will figure out on their own how to keep the lights on, which employees will keep working without a salary. As the chair of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Bankruptcy and the Courts, I've heard from a number of federal judges this week frustrated by the amount of time they're spending trying to figure out what the shutdown means for their courts and their employees, rather than doing the job for which they were confirmed, which was to judge cases. This is an enormous distraction, a profound waste of time. This is not advancing our core objective, which should be growing our economy, strengthening our country, confronting the fiscal challenges in front of us, working together to achieve some principled compromises here in the Congress of the United States. Mr. President, in my view, our federal judges should be deciding cases, not deciding how to keep their courthouses running during this federal government shutdown. This needs to end. And it could end literally today, in a matter of minutes, if Speaker Boehner would bring to the floor and allow a vote on a bill sent over from this Senate more than 10 days ago that would allow the federal government to reopen. The Judicial Branch is not another federal agency. It's not a program that can be suspended or a benefit that can be delayed. It is a branch. The federal court system was created in our Constitution as the third pillar of our democracy. It's an independent branch of government whose fundamental mission is being undermined by folks, some of whom claim to love and to rigidly interpret the Constitution, yet the consequences for our constitutional order of this senseless shutdown, I am afraid, will soon become clear in the days ahead. The subcommittee has heard from a number of federal judges and clerks this week, and I've got to warn you, there's lots of unanswered questions here. The path forward is murky. The central question in the courts, as it was here in the Congress and the executive branch, is who is considered essential. Is it just the people directly involved in the resolution of cases, or staff that support the process are also to be expected to work without pay? Here's the type of question our judiciary was dealing with just today. Instead of resolving disputes or working on long-term cost-saving measures, evidence in our federal courts these days are typically presented electronically to jurors rather than being handed out as photocopies, which is great so long as the technology is working in the courtroom. Case files are processed electronically these days as well. But what if there's a problem? What if the IT, the technology, doesn't work and a trial is disrupted? At what point does a technology glitch become a legitimate due process issue? If the courtroom technology can't get an upgrade to fix a bug, will it result in a costly mistrial? The Constitution, in the Sixth Amendment, guarantees criminal defendants the right to a speedy trial. What happens when our courts can't live up to that Sixth Amendment guarantee because of this ongoing federal shutdown? The problem's equally severe in civil and bankruptcy matters. With the DOJ's Office of the U.S. Trustee in shutdown status, the number of trustee attorneys in Delaware has been cut from 7 to 2. This can dramatically slow the bankruptcy process and leave real jobs and real lives hanging in the balance as cases are unresolved and as resolutions don't move forward. This raises another fundamental question. At what point in this ongoing senseless shutdown does our civil justice system fail to live up to America's promise as a free market economy grounded in the rule of law? When an investor anywhere in the world looks to make a bet on a new company, a new idea, that investor obtains certain rights in exchange. Those rights include a share of equity or priority right in the event of liquidation. What gives those rights meaning is ultimately a highly functioning, impartial, and reliable court system. That's historically been one of our great advantages competitively as a country in the world economy. Our courts, even while plagued by persistent vacancies, lack of new authorized judgeships, and the sequester, our courts continue to perform this vital function. Without these courts, these rights mean nothing. Without the reliable enforcement of these rights, there's no more new investment, no new job creation that results, no new ideas successfully brought to market. We're not the only country in the world competing for investment and for ideas. And when we undermine our civil courts, we're being hostile to those very investors who could help get our economy back on track. The federal shutdown is already slowing the resolution of civil cases involving the federal government. Clerks at district courts around the country have confirmed to my subcommittee that the Department of Justice is requesting continuances broadly and across the board, trying to juggle the demands of their caseloads with the constraints of this reckless shutdown. Think about it. Social Security appeals, civil forfeiture cases, business disputes, consumer protection cases, Medicare fraud cases, incidents of employment discrimination. They are all being pushed to the back burner. This shutdown is bringing new meaning to Dr. King's famous words that justice too long delayed is justice denied. Just this morning, I heard from the head of Delaware's District Court, Chief Judge Greg Sleet. He said, in essence, no insult intended, but his observation was that Congress is letting our country down. The subcommittee also spoke with a district court clerk yesterday who said, and I thought this was particularly striking, he was glad he was nearing retirement so he could escape the dysfunction of the federal government and our ongoing, seemingly routine manufactured crises. Mr. President, This shutdown is exacerbating what is really a more profound problem, a disregard for the upkeep and support of our federal judiciary. With 90 federal judgeships vacant and 39 vacancies that are deemed judicial emergencies, we need to do more to support and sustain the quality and the staffing and the future investment required to make our federal courts work as well as they possibly can. Let me, Mr. President, make a point or two, if I might, in conclusion. First, one of the essential questions every district court and circuit court will face is which of their employees are essential. After all the cuts of the sequester and all the burdens and challenges facing our courts, aren't all the remaining employees of our federal judicial system, this separate branch, essential? The Chief Judge of the Third Judicial Circuit of the United States says so, and I agree with him. This morning he announced that nearly all functions will be deemed essential. In my view, I join the Chief Circuit Judge of the Third Circuit and urge other circuits to follow suit and to recognize this independent third branch of our constitutional order is essential. Last, this shutdown has dragged morale in our courts and our court system to a new low. We here in Congress are blessed with a record number of attorneys who serve in the United States Congress. It's my hope that this body recognizes the unique value of our federal court system. Our democracy cannot afford to furlough justice. We cannot shut the doors to our courthouses, and it is my hope that Speaker Boehner, following the conversation unfolding right now at the White House, will come back, put to the vote an action that will allow the courts and this country to get back to work.